There she is. Can you hear me? Why can't, oh, I'm trying to figure out why I can't hear you.
Yes, I can. Can you hear me now?
Are you muted?
No, I just hit unmute.
I'm not
Hello,
muted.
hello.
What's going on? Oh, wait a minute. That's not it either.
Do you have your audio off?
Up there it goes. Says my internet connection is unstable. I'm probably hooked into the wrong one.
Oh,
There we go. That's better. Did you get the book by any chance?
I did.
Oh, good.
I got it from Amazon and I've had it for at least 2 or 3 weeks, maybe.
We just got ours today. I picked them up.
Wow, it took a long time.
Yeah, well, when they ordered it, the word came back. It said this order is print by order. So they had to print the book for us.
Oh, no way. I ordered it on Amazon. It was 10 bucks.
Probably had so much. Ours is 11.
Hi, Marianne.
I don't know who that was, but hello. I heard somebody in the back room saying hello, Jerry Ann.
It was Jerry.
Oh, hello.
We're holding up, see if we get a couple of more people. Kay got here and Bob's here, but
Bob, who? I don't know Bob. Who's Bob?
Bob Virtue
Oh, okay.
and me.
That's an awful lot of soup, but that's all that's there.
Tell me about it. Well, they have plans for whatever's left over, I think. This chili kind of one has whole tomatoes in it. The stewed tomatoes.
Yeah, sometimes that's a little hard to eat. They fall off the spoon.
It's good though. It's delicious. I got to go get my phone to see who's on YouTube.
My mom was totally right. Made the soups. Do you ladies that cook for the pantry?
Oh, that's interesting.
That's what happens. From it's here. It's not a cold. It's a crumb. Yeah, that's a little gingery to me. I just smelled it before out the other one. Which one did you get? The one I have.
It's good. I had 2 bowls.
The one is a little ginger, a little chicken one.
Oh,
Has a lot of ginger. Yeah, this one I like.
doggone it.
You take for the pork.
Both,
Oh, okay.
both, yeah. And I just spilled on the ground. Yeah, that's the truth. Let's, oh, okay.
Yeah, that's the truth.
We got folks on YouTube and on Zoom. Karen Tess is on with us and Carol Sigorsky is on with us. That's good. Gonna finish a little bit of this soup. We're gonna hold on just a couple more minutes, see if any of the other live people get here.
That sounded a little weird, you know. Any of the live people?
There's one. Did you bring him with you?
No. Still have some soup left for us.
I don't know if you'll be able to finish it.
There's 2 big pots. Let me just shut this door.
Let's see who else was here last week live. Kay's here, Jerry's here, Bob's here. Jim's here. Frank and Elaine are not here. Sheila Bluney was here this morning. Sue was here this morning, and Mike was here this morning. So that explains that. Yeah, here, pass this around, make sure everybody signs up. And then we'll put the names of the people who are on YouTube on there too. Sorry, I can't offer you anything, Karen, Tessa, or Carol. I already got apologies to Jerry Ann. Take a look at this chicken soup.
Sorry, where's the soup at?
It's in the kitchen.
Wow.
On the stove.
I'm trying to see if I can get the,
Are you
There.
trying to tempt me?
no, I'm trying to show you how meaty it is.
It looks great.
If anybody brings in the other kind, I'll show you that too. I just know you're interested in soup.
I actually was in one of the stores today and I bought a mix for a broccoli cheddar.
Mhm.
And they give you some ideas for additions. And one of them, which I thought was interesting, is I've never seen it before, was chicken. Adding chicken and sour cream to the broccoli cheddar soup.
Wow,
Yeah, that's
Sounds
kind of
good.
what I said.
sounds like a lot.
It does, and it makes a lot of soup.
Oh boy, this is delicious. It's got ginger in it.
Oh, I like ginger. I got on a kick. I was making pot sticker soup,
Oh, yeah?
frozen pot stickers.
Uh-huh.
And I think that's probably what we're gonna do on Friday because I have some vegetable pot stickers. So I'll make soup
Oh.
instead of having anything with meat.
Now, what happened to my book? Huh. I hope nobody grabbed my book. The books are in, but I don't see where my book went. Unless they just threw it in here. Oh, grief and gravy. It's possible, but I thought I had left it out here and the group that came in and cleared the table for their meeting. And I don't know. Oh, thank you. The rate I'm going, by the time you get back, I'll have been through all the books. Here it is.
Yay.
They threw it all back in here.
Mm.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. You took a book today. That's 7. And you took a book today. So that's 8. Okay, I just want to make sure I got my count right.
Yes. 11. No.
I just opened up my Bible and I found a piece of paper I was using as a bookmark.
Yeah.
And it's the list of the soups I made the last time I made soups for church.
Uh, Well, like I said, you set a really good example.
That came from the church I went to in Bud Lake.
Really?
Yeah,
Wow.
we used to get a really big crowd.
Yeah.
We'd have 25, 26. I think the most we have is 26.
Well,
But
when you put everybody together of who we've got here, we are actually doing pretty well. Last week, who has the sign up list? Can I pass it down here?
Oh, it's 11?
Last week,
And I listened to it on
okay, thank you.
the next day. I went on to the one that was online, the YouTube one.
Last week, we had 27 between the two things.
And then I played it. So I don't know if you're keeping count for that for the parochial reports, but I actually went on the next day and I listened to the thing on YouTube off of the website.
And this week, we have so far 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 15 this morning. 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 22 this week.
Good.
5 plus. But I count the folks on the YouTube and all.
Yeah, we count. When we were doing this up in Bud Lake, it got to be pretty big. And it got to be it was dinner. It wasn't just soup.
Oh, wow.
Somebody would bring appetizers. Sometimes somebody brought a pizza. There were at least 2 or 3 soups. There was somebody else brought dessert. There was a lot of stuff.
Sounds great.
It really was. It really was.
Okay, go. As soon as Kay gets back, we'll get started. Oh, Carol's here.
Yeah, I came off the other one because I didn't think you could hear me. on
I couldn't
YouTube.
hear you. I can't hear you on the other one. Yeah, if you want to participate, you got to be on Zoom.
Okay.
I really hate doing it that way, but some people can't get on Zoom, so they have to be on something, and I make sure YouTube's available. Okay. Everybody got up while I was eating my soup to go out and use the restroom. I'm down by 3. Either that or they went to get another bowl of soup. That's possible. Carol, did you get a book yet?
I got one on Amazon.
Okay.
If you ordered one for me and you want me to buy it, I'll buy it. But
I'm
if
not-
someone else
I'm
wants
not
it,
taking anybody's money. This is supposed to be a good thing. What about Karen Tessa and Karen Tessa, because you went off the other one. Karen Tessa, do you need a book or did you get one? Actually, Karen Tessa, if you want to come by, you can, and you can get the book, you can have some soup. And Karen Tessa says, should I stop by for a book? Immediately after saying soup looks great, I'll be right there. You're welcome, Karen Tessa, anytime. Anytime. You can listen on YouTube on the way over. Plug it into your phone in the car. Okey doke. We're missing Bob. There he is. Hey, Jim. All right. I picked somebody each week to say the opening prayer. So you did it last week, right? Did you? Who did it last week? No, I didn't. I did the closing prayer.
Where is the opening prayer at?
It's not. That's why I make you guys do it. You want to take a shot at it, Jim?
Well, yeah, what prayer do you want me to say?
And any prayer you want, and just include something for my wife who had eye surgery this morning.
Oh, okay. Dear Lord, please bless this meeting and other churches and those people who are those who have just been deceased and those who are sick, including Father Paul's wife. Please comfort them and relieve their pain. All you've given us. Amen.
Amen. All righty. Well, the opening, the scripture for today is Matthew 18, 21 and 22. Matthew. (18) Matthew 18, 21 and 22.
Oh, no. 23.
Yeah, we're on page 23 now.
Oh, all right, I'm sorry.
I was looking under Matthew.
Oh, okay.
Hey, Jerry, you missed it.
What I miss?
Jerry was waving at you. All right. Then Peter came up and said to him, Lord, how often shall my brother sin against me, and I forgive him? As many as 7 times? Jesus said to him, I do not say to you 7 times, but 70 times 7. The word of the Lord. Good should be no surprise that one of the marks of Christian character is the capacity to forgive. It is part of the prayer that Jesus taught us to pray. Forgive us our trespasses as we forgive those who trespass against us. He spent a significant portion of his greatest sermon, the Sermon on the Mount, talking about loving your enemies and turning the other cheek. And it was so important to Jesus that he spent some of his final fleeting energy to forgive those who crucified him, praying, Father, forgive them, for they know not what they're doing. But when it all comes down to it, we can acknowledge how uncertain we feel about this whole subject of forgiveness. Why should we forgive? How can we forgive when it's so hard to do? What difference does forgiveness make anyway? Apparently, we're not alone in our wondering. Peter was wrestling with this question as well. And if anything, Jesus' answer drew Peter into even more uncertainty about forgiveness. You've got to love the way Jesus answers his questions. Sometimes he would answer them directly, but often he wouldn't. Sometimes he would answer questions with other questions, or with silence, or by telling a story. And then there were times he avoided answering them altogether. Jesus must have loved surprising the questioners with his indirect answer or non-answers. We might imagine a little twinkle in his eye and a curl in his lip in that moment of silence as he formulated his response. And then we could watch his face light up as he waited for their reaction. Peter asked a fairly straightforward question, really. Lord, how many times should I forgive my brother or sister who sins against me? How many times, Jesus? Peter, always the pragmatist, wanted a number. He knew Jewish law. He may also have known about rabbinic teachings that held he was only required to forgive someone 3 times, sort of like an ancient 3 strikes and you're out rule. The only thing that matched Peter's pragmatism, however, was his impetuous zeal. He said, should I forgive as many as 7 times? You can almost hear in Peter's voice the kind of puffed up motivation that blindly plagues our best intentions for forgiveness. It's as if he was saying, look, Jesus, I know I'm only supposed to forgive a person 3 times, but what if I forgave that person 7 times? Double the number I'm required, plus 1 for good measure. I bet that would make me a pretty good disciple, huh? Just leave it to Peter to turn the most earnest question into a self-seeking opportunity for praise. Honestly, we can relate to him, can't we? One of the reasons we love Peter is that he is a mirror to our own souls. Let's confess for a moment how much we also are driven to forgive for the same motivations. If I forgive this person, it will prove that I'm a better person than I am. If I forgive someone, then surely God will be pleased with me. Forgiveness then can become more of an exercise in self-adulation and personal aggrandizement than anything else. Peter was really asking, Jesus, if I forgive someone more than I'm supposed to, won't you be impressed? We know what was in Peter's heart, because frankly, it's also in ours. Jesus knew it too. He knew that Peter wasn't really asking how many times he should forgive. Peter's straightforward sounding question wasn't really so straightforward after all. Jesus could see through it. He knew Peter wasn't just asking for a number. Peter really was asking why he should forgive. Jesus saw in Peter's question a need to know what forgiveness is for, what it's really about. That's why he answered the question in a most odd way. Not just 7 times, but rather as many as 77 times. Don't forgive 7 times, Peter. Forgive 77 times, Or another way to understand the Greek expression is 70 times 7 times, which amounts to 490 times. To which all God's people might say, huh? Now, let's be careful with Jesus' answer. There are those who would try to interpret it literally. I've got it, Jesus. Forgive someone 490 times. Let me break out my notebook and start keeping track. You know, there's part of us that would do that too. We like to keep track. We like to keep score. It would be like saying to someone, you know what? I've got you down right now for 433 times. By the end of this year, you're gonna be in trouble. But to interpret Jesus' answer in that way would be to miss the point altogether. Jesus was not answering Peter's question about the number of times to forgive. Rather, he was addressing Peter's deeper question. Why should we forgive? What should be our motivation? What, in its essence, is forgiveness? If forgiveness is not an exercise in self-adulation, and if forgiveness is not a parlor game of keeping score, then what is it? What did Jesus really mean when he said to forgive 70 times, 7 times? How does this help us understand why we should forgive in the first place? To answer these questions, let's remember some basic background for the Gospel of Matthew. It was written in the 1st century AD, mostly to a community of Jewish followers of Jesus, probably residing in or around the ancient city of Antioch. That means this book was written to people with a clear understanding of Jewish stories and Hebrew ideas. Matthew's audience would therefore have been familiar with the number 7 and its symbolic meanings. They would have known that 7 symbolized completion or perfection. They would have known that the first and most predominant use of the number 7 was in the very first story in the Hebrew scriptures. The first chapter of Genesis records how God created all things. How long did it take God to create light, planets, stars, trees, animals, and humans? You remember, 6 days. But the creation was not finished until God employed a 7th day to reflect, to enjoy creation, and to rest. It was the 7th day that brought creation to completion. It was the 7th day that brought to perfection God's work of order out of chaos. It was in the 7th day that God was finished. The number 7 would therefore take on special meaning in the narratives and rituals of the Hebrew people. Every 7th day, they would be commanded to rest, observe the Sabbath, restore themselves to health. Every 7th year, they would be called to give the land a rest and restore it to nourishment. Every 7th cycle of 7 years, in the year of Jubilee, they would be called to forgive debts, release slaves, restore the land to its ancestral owners. The point is this: the number 7 would always convey to the Israelites a sense of completion and a call to restoration, healing, and reconciliation. In the Hebrew mind, participating in the number 7 would be cosmic in nature, with universal consequences. Human rest every 7 days was in harmony with the created order, in which God rested on the 7th day. It involved joining together in partnership with God, who brought order out of chaos in the days of creation and is always working to bring restoration, rest, and healing out of a broken world. Jesus' answer about forgiveness blew Peter away, not because it suggested an astronomical number of times to forgive, but because it expanded Peter's thinking about the nature and purpose of forgiveness. By saying we're to forgive 70 times, 7 times, Jesus showed Peter that forgiveness is about our participation in the complete restoration of all the world. Mark that one down. Jesus showed Peter that forgiveness is about our participation in the complete restoration of all the world. The act of forgiving someone else for any offense may feel like a private matter in a singular relationship between two individuals, but in Jesus's view, it is a sacred act with cosmic implications. You might want to underline that one too. A sacred act with cosmic implications. Forgiveness is full participation in the activity of God to restore all creation back to its original health, wholeness, and state of goodness. You might underline that one too. This whole section is full of good stuff. Forgiveness is full participation in the activity of God to restore all creation back to its original health, wholeness, and state of goodness. If you think forgiveness is just a small exchange between humans, think again. Whenever you forgive, you participate in God's greatest ongoing project, the restoration of the whole world back to the way it was originally intended. You can underline that last sentence too. Whenever you forgive, you participate in God's greatest ongoing project, the restoration of the whole world back to the way it was originally intended. That's why in teaching us to pray, Jesus linked with the same breath the kingdom of heaven and forgiveness in the Lord's Prayer. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread. Forgive us our trespasses as we forgive those who trespass against us. There's another one to underline. Forgiveness is nothing less than kingdom building activity. But make no mistake, a single act of forgiveness not only helps build the kingdom of God in the cosmic universal sense, but it can also help build God's kingdom within your own heart, mind, and spirit. And that begins with the healing that can happen in your own life. There's an emerging field over the past several years in medicine and health and psychotherapy that explores the healing power of forgiveness. A number of studies have proven that the more one learns to forgive, the healthier one can be mentally, emotionally, and even physically. For those who have the book, you'll notice that's footnoted. You might want to look at that later. Studies have linked the ability to forgive and move past grudges to reduce blood pressure and stress levels. Being able to forgive can lead to a decrease in pain, depression, and anger in patients with chronic pain. And forgiveness therapy has led to lower levels of reported anxiety and depression among women who have been abused by a spouse. There is a link between healing and forgiveness. When you forgive, you participate in the healing of broken creation back into divine order. You also move toward a greater sense of your own healing and wholeness in your relationships. In the end, the consequences of not forgiving are often brokenness, personal destruction, and deep sorrow. How many of you have ever heard someone say to you, you might as well forgive him because by holding a grudge, you're hurting yourself more than you're hurting him?
Yes.
It's the God's honest truth. Jim Harnish, the former senior pastor of the church where I now serve, once shared the following experience from his own ministry. If you haven't read this yet, listen, you're going to love it. While serving his first church, he received an urgent call from a couple in the church, asking him to visit them in their house. He rushed right over with no idea as to what the issue might be. He recollects that upon entering the house, he discovered the house was just as joyless as they were. The anger in the room was as dark and thick as the drapes that covered the windows. Immediately after he entered the house, the wife started to pour out the depths of her hurt and the anger she was feeling at her husband. With one vivid and painful detail after another, she described the story of how he betrayed her by having an affair with her best friend. After she poured out her heart, vented all of her simmering anger, Jim turned to the husband, asking him if he indeed did these things. Yes, the man said, I've done it. And he confessed to his wife. He went on to say that he asked her to forgive him, but that she isn't able to do so. Something instinctively kicked into Pastor Jim at that moment. He turned to the couple and he asked, when did this happen? She snarled back, 35 years ago. Wow, that's a long time to harbor resentment. And one can imagine the long, gradual, and deteriorating pain in that relationship. A failure to forgive over the long haul can impede the experience of God's free flow of peace, joy, and healing in a person's life. But forgiveness doesn't have to mean to forgive and forget. We've heard that cliche so many times, we believe that forgetting is necessary if we're going to forgive. We don't recognize or account for the fact that usually forgetting isn't even possible. Completely forgetting a past hurt is usually not achievable, given the way our minds work. We cannot simply erase a memory the way that we can reformat a computer hard drive or take an eraser to a chalkboard. Memories can't just disappear, and past offenses can't just evaporate. Forgiveness also does not mean pretending that whatever happened in the past never happened, nor does it mean that the offense is now considered okay. We don't forget harmful events or the pain that they caused. Forgiveness instead involves the conscious choice to end the cycle of bitterness, revenge, and grudge holding that is destroying your relationship with another person. Underline that one. Forgiveness involves the conscious choice to end the cycle of bitterness, revenge, and grudge holding that is destroying your relationship with another person. It means that you will stop trying to hurt the other person for what they've done to you. Forgiveness means owning your attitudes and your actions and saying to the other person, I choose not to hurt you anymore, regardless of what we have done to each other in the past. Then forgiveness means you make the conscious choice to decentralize the impact of that hurt in your life. Read that one again. Forgiveness means you make the conscious choice to decentralize the impact of that hurt in your life. In other words, you move the pain away from the core of who you are. Forgiveness does not mean forgetting the hurt, but it does not mean deciding that you will no longer be defined by that hurt. Your emotions and your reactions will not be dictated by it. Instead of forgive and forget, you will forgive and decentralize. You will choose slowly and steadily to push the hurt away from being the center of your life to out toward the fringe of your consciousness. It will not govern your life like it did before. And you know as well as I do, forgiveness takes time. All of this takes time. In the last chapter, the life and words of Thomas Merton gave us a model for how to embrace the uncertainty of doubt and disbelief. For the topic of forgiveness, I can hardly think of a more prominent and consequential figure than Archbishop Desmond Tutu, rest his soul, who helped lead the people of South Africa through the atrocities of apartheid and works to rebuild their society into one of freedom and love. What does Tutu believe are the three hardest words to say? I am sorry. His reflections on these words tell us a lot about why we should forgive. In 2014, the British news agency The Guardian published a guest column by Desmond Tutu, in which he addressed those three hardest words to say. He began by sharing vivid childhood memories of his father's physical abuse of his mother. He remembered the smell of the alcohol in the house and on his father's breath. And he could picture the abject fear and desolation in his mother's face whenever his father would attack her. The actions of his father were as incomprehensible years later as they were when he was just a young boy, as he wondered how anyone he loved could be so inconceivably hurtful. As a result, Tutu spent his life learning how to forgive his now deceased father for those atrocities, and he bluntly acknowledges the difficulty in doing so. He tried to rationalize it intellectually, acknowledging his father's own pain from his background and past struggles. He tried to filter the pain spiritually, knowing that his father deserved forgiveness just as much as any of God's children, and God forgives all of us of our transgressions. But despite the intellectual understanding and the spiritual conviction, Tutu came to the conclusion that forgiveness remains difficult. Such pain as he experienced stays in one's memory as a constant obstacle to forgiveness. Such approaches are natural. We rationalize, we theologize, we access every resource we can to forgive because we know we must. Sometimes these attempts bring us back to Peter's question for Jesus, because we want to know for how to forgive, how long it will take to forgive, and how to make it in life until forgiveness is complete. We want the number, how many times, because forgiveness is hard and we don't want to do it one time more than we should. Jesus' words remind Peter that the primary question is not how or how often, but why we should forgive. In the same way, Tutu realized that the key to forgiveness lies not in our method, but in our motivation for doing so. Tutu said, "Why would I do such a thing? I know it is the only way to heal the pain in my brother and my boyhood heart. Forgiveness is not dependent on the actions of others. We don't forgive to help the other person. We don't forgive for others. We forgive for ourselves. Forgiveness, in other words, is the best form of self-interest." I love that last line. Forgiveness is the best form of self-interest. You might want to underline that. Forgiveness is not namby-pamby acquiescence. It is not the wimpy way out. Like the bag commercial, wimpy, wimpy, wimpy. It certainly does not advise that the victim continue to suffer abuse. Instead, it is a bold proclamation to the perpetrator that the attempts to dehumanize have failed. It is a refusal to participate in the cycle of revenge that destroys relationships and human worth. Forgiveness declares an end to mutual destruction and begins a path toward healing. In short, forgiveness is the best form of self-interest. That's why words that seek forgiveness are, in Tutu's mind, difficult to say. I am sorry, he writes, are perhaps the three hardest words to say, and yet they are powerful enough to set us free if we are able to say them. Words that seek and offer forgiveness allow us to orient ourselves toward an uncertain but hopeful future. As Tutu says, it is how we free ourselves from our past errors. It is how we are able to move forward into our future, unfettered by the mistakes we have made. If you ever need a vivid example of what forgiveness looks like, then Lent points us to the cross of Jesus. There you'll find the greatest model for forgiveness humanity has ever received. And thank God for it, because it is in God's forgiveness of us that we discover true freedom and true healing. Forgiveness is a difficult task. There is never a guarantee that asking for it or granting it will be easy. We may choose to forgive it. We may choose to forgive. It will be impossible to forget. Our minds are too keen and our God-given memories too sharp to ever get to a point where we'll virtually eclipse the memories of the offense. Even if we know we are supposed to forgive, it doesn't make forgiveness easy or its outcome predictable. That's what makes it so uncertain. But we are called to forgive nonetheless. And rather than forget, we can pray that our recollections will cease being central to our memory and move to the periphery, leaving only the details rather than the pain associated with them. In the end, we must believe that forgiveness is not optional in the Christian life. It is a calling of the highest standard, a sacred action prompted by a divine impulse. It is God who calls us to forgive, and it is God who enables us to forgive for the healing of the world and the healing of our souls. What difference does it make for you to see the act of forgiveness as not just a private act between two people, but as participation in God's grand act of restoring all of broken creation? How does that affect your understanding of forgiveness?
Doesn't mean that you have to say anything to the person or deal with their issues. It means that it's with you, from within you, to forgive the person,
Yes.
and it furthers God's work.
Yeah, you can forgive someone who's died.
Mhm.
Matter of fact, I know several people who've had to forgive people who have died for dying. I see people say, "Why did you die and leave me here all alone? You had nerve to, I'm going to kill you if I catch up with you." Yes.
I read somewhere in the Bible, I don't exactly remember where, but if you suffer from very deep feelings of guilt, think of someone that did something very terrible to you that really hurt you. And if you can forgive them, that could help absolve some of your guilt.
Forgiveness is critical
Yeah.
to self-love.
Yeah, because if you carry all this bitterness around with you, you're going to make your life more miserable, and even the people around you more miserable. So it doesn't pay. Just try to forgive. I mean, even if you can't forget, just try to forgive, and you'll feel a lot better. It's like a big burden has been lifted from your mind.
And you are the one who does the action, and you are the one who gets the benefit.
Yes.
The other
You know,
person,
yeah.
the other person doesn't even have to be aware that you've done it. Now, if they are, that can add to a good, strong Christian witness. If you say to somebody who's really hurt you, "Look, you really hurt me. I probably have every right in the world to never talk to you again and hate you forever. But I choose to forgive you. And I want you to know that I will no longer harbor any ill thoughts or actions toward you in my life."
Right. Or I just say, well, look, I don't want to have any hard feelings. let's start over.
That's another way, yes. It's a little
Because
less,
I've had people that have really hurt me, but I know that by forgiving them, I'll feel better. Even if they don't, I know I will.
it takes energy to hate. It takes a lot of energy and focus from your life to want to harbor ill will and ill feelings about an individual. It can actually occupy so much of your time that you begin to lose your sharpness in other areas because you're too busy thinking about the thing you hate.
And you could even wind up hating yourself.
Oh, yeah. Because once you realize how much you hate the other person, you know that's not right. And you get mad at yourself. That's very true. What do you think? Jerry Ann?
I think the hardest person to forgive is yourself.
Yes,
That's true.
yes.
And when I finally asked God for forgiveness and I felt it, it was overwhelming. And my life changed dramatically for the better.
I've noticed. She said that when she forgave herself, that her life changed to the better immensely, dramatically. You're right. Forgiving yourself is the hardest thing. When I hear confessions, I don't hear a lot too often anymore, but over 30 years, I've heard my fair share. People will come to me and they'll say, first thing they do is they assume that whatever they've done is the worst thing in the world. No one's ever done anything worse than them. And they're all going to hell because they know God doesn't love them anymore. Boy, do they go down the list. And I spend time with them. And I talk with them. And I help them to talk to God. I reassure them that God loves them and wants to forgive them if they're really penitent. And they tell me, I'm really penitent. I really want to be forgiven, Father. Can you give me absolution? I give them absolution. I give them a good one too. And then when it's all done, they walk out of the office saying, thank you, Father, I feel so much better. And then a week later, they come back and say, did he really forgive me? I mean, it was really, really bad. And I don't know, I'm not sure. And I tell them, did I tell you he forgave you? Yes.
Also, if we want God to forgive us, let's say we really feel guilty about something we did to offend God. If we expect him to forgive us, we have to be able to forgive other people too.
And we have
expect
to,
him to forgive us.
and we have to be able to forgive ourselves.
Yeah.
But what's the great commandment say? Love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your mind, and with all your strength. And
Love your neighbor as yourself.
Love your neighbor.
how do you love your neighbor? As yourself. You have to love yourself first. You have to forgive yourself first. If you can't forgive yourself and you can't love yourself, you cannot love or forgive anyone else in the world.
That's true.
It is impossible.
I know, I've had that problem.
You didn't have to do that. I confess it right here. I mean, Bob.
No.
Yeah. Jim,
It helps me get it out of my system.
good. But it's the truth. If all you do is walk through life saying, I'm no good, I'm not as good as anybody else, everybody's better than I am, I'm more sinful than everybody else, no one else sins as much as I do, well, that's the way things are going to end up. And not only is it going to end up that way for you, but it's going to end up for the way you treat everybody else, because you'll assume they're the same as you are.
You always hear the expression, you don't love yourself, no one else will.
So there's truth to that too.
I know I've said that to like the kids, the grandkids, you have to love yourself.
But anyway, let's tell you about the people who come to confession. They come back 2 weeks later and say, are you sure he forgave me? I mean, I say, would you like me to absolve you one more time? I'll do a really good one this time. And I promise you'll be absolved. And I know God's forgiven you. I just talked to him yesterday. And they look at you and you give them their absolution. They go out and 3 weeks later, they're back in the office saying, are you sure I'm being forgiven? They are haunted by their sin.
Yeah, I mean.
And they cannot believe in their deepest depths that God would forgive them. And if they don't believe that God will forgive them, and if that they can forgive themselves, then they cannot believe that anyone else on earth can be forgiven either. It's a terrible place to be.
I guess,
It is,
yeah,
it is.
yeah.
It's a pit of despair. You have to get someone to admit. Now, when you talk to people like that, the first thing they say is, well, I remember it. How can it be forgiven if I remember it? Well, just explain why. God gave us one of the most wonderful things in the world, a real good memory. And we remember. Doesn't mean we think it was good.
Right,
It doesn't mean that we want to do it again, but it means that we remember.
right.
And if we remember, then maybe it will help us avoid doing it again. Maybe it'll take us away from the pitfalls that got us to where we did that terrible sin in the first place. Maybe it'll put us in mind that we need God's forgiveness, and we turn to him and ask him to be with us and forgive us and restore us to wholeness of body, mind, and spirit. God doesn't want us to forget. What's the famous maxim? Those who forget history are doomed to repeat it.
Yes.
Well, it's the same in our own life. It doesn't have to be a country in a big battle and war on a military field. It can be in our own hearts and our own souls. We need to forgive. Now, does it come slowly? Even with ourselves, it's going to come slowly. It doesn't mean it's instant and complete. It may never be complete. It might not need to be complete. As long as you forgive yourself enough that you know that God loves you and you're headed in the right direction, then you remember enough that you don't never do it again, and maybe even help other people avoid the same pitfalls. Maybe teach your kids,
Maybe we'll.
maybe teach your kids what they
Oh,
shouldn't
yeah,
do.
yeah.
Let's go to another
Yeah,
question.
You have to ask for forgiveness, but then believe that you forgive them. Right?
Yep. In what ways is it difficult to forgive? Not just because of what someone else has done to you, but because of your own reluctance, inability, or misunderstanding. In what ways is it difficult to forgive? Wait, I'm going to try and draw Bob into this conversation. Oh, Bob. What do you think? What makes it hard to forgive?
I guess when someone does something that radically alters your life, takes something from you that you can't get back.
Yeah. I've heard many young people that I've talked to confidentially about their depression or their poor grades at school or something like that. And they turn around and they say things like that about their parents. Their favorite phrase is, they stole my childhood. Now, sometimes that's just dramatic, but sometimes it's true. They stole my childhood. They thought I had to be brought up like an army brat and had to salute my father, or something silly like that, or they demanded straight A's, and if I didn't get them, they called me a failure and a flop, and made me work harder, and all things like that. Of course, you encourage your kids to get good grades. Of course, you encourage them to be orderly in their life. But there's some people who go just a little bit overboard, and that's not good. And they could consider that stealing their childhood. A kid needs to make mistakes. That's how they learn. Kid needs to explore and experiment, because that's how they learn. And if they don't have some life experience in those areas, then they go into the latter part of life ill prepared for they're going to face. I'm not saying you push your child out into traffic on their bike, but Although there's been times I've been tempted. But you do, if they do go out in the street on the bike, you bring them back in, and if they're old enough to ride a bike, they're old enough to understand. And you tell them, you say, how stupid was that? Don't you love your life? Don't you want to be healthy and whole? You know? Stop the bike and look both ways before you go across the street. It's not just a rule. It's not just what I want you to do. It's what you need to do to protect yourself, to keep from getting hurt. And you're the only one that's going to be able to do it, because I don't ride the bike with you. You ride it by yourself. That's okay. But you don't put an alarm on the bike, and every time the child gets near the curb, go running and say, you idiot! Like those little dog collars. Yeah, it's hard to forgive. But the way to forgiveness, according to Tutu and according to others, is to take the hurt and push it to the periphery of your being and retain the memory, so as not to commit the same sin again yourself, or allow someone else to commit the same sin against you yourself. Push the hurt to the outside. Remove the immediacy of the see, that's what happens when we remember. It's like it's happening over and over and over and over. It's like it's right now, right here.
What happens if it is happening over and over and over?
Well, then needs to be something reported or whatever, you know, to cease the difficulty. You can forgive and still hold people accountable. There are lots of kids who forgive their parents for beating them, even when they're older, and maybe dad gives them one good swift punch in the arm just to remind them who's boss. They can still forgive, but they don't forget. One of the things they don't forget is when I have my child, I will never do that to them. I will never make them feel the way I felt. And I will forgive my father because he just either didn't know what he was doing or was sick in the head. But I don't think he did it because he wanted me to suffer pain. If he did, he's a very sick person. And he needs special kinds of care. Yeah.
I think sometimes too, like, it's not that the person means any harm, but they think that by being rough on you, that's gonna bring out the best in you.
Yeah.
Somehow, they feel that they have to shame you into doing better.
Yeah. It can be in grades, it can be in performance, it could be in sports, it could be in anything.
Now, this is interesting. I mean, like in my family, I had cousins that were very successful. One was a doctor, one was a mortgage business. And my father would always say to me, well, gee, why can't you be like your cousins? And I mean, I tried very hard. I mean, I worked during the day, I went to school nights, got my diploma and everything. And but towards the end of his life, my father told me, gee, you really had it rough, but I'm proud of you. So I don't know, maybe he felt that he had to be that way to force me to do better.
Maybe that was his way of saying, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I'm going to disagree with the Desmond Tutu on one thing, though. I tell people all the time, I've preached it from the pulpit. I've done it in premarital counseling. I've done it in family counseling and with youth counseling. Never, ever, ever say you're sorry. That's not how to solve the problem. I'm sorry doesn't mean anything except now we can stop talking about it. And if somebody says, well, you hurt my feelings, and you say, well, I'm sorry. Like, now let's stop talking about it. What you say is, please forgive me. And I think that's what Tutu meant to say. I really do. I think he used I'm sorry probably because it was the vernacular, It's what people would normally say. But you really should say, please forgive me. Because when you say, please forgive me, you're taking the power of the moment and placing it in the hands of the person who was offended. They're able now to say, this is what you have to do for me to forgive you. Maybe that's something as simple as never do it again. Maybe it's something more complicated. Maybe if it's your 15th time home late for dinner and the 15th pot roast that your wife burned up waiting for you, maybe you have to take it to Ruth's Chris Steakhouse. But the person who's been offended will tell you, if you do this, I'll know you're sincere and I will forgive you. Now that sounds a little rough in some ways, but it's not. You are not in control of what someone else does in terms of forgiving you. So I'm sorry doesn't cut it. Please forgive me does, and then wait and see what they're going to tell you has to be done. And accept the terms, as long as they're reasonable. I mean, get me $1 million would be a little unreasonable. Or buy me a winning lottery ticket would even be a little unreasonable. But that's what you have to do. And if you're I hate this. I can't answer. It's somebody who just wants to call and say hello.
What if you're talking about the offended person? The offended person is not the one to say, please forgive me.
The person who's been offended can say, I forgive you, even if you didn't ask for it. The person who commits the crime, so to speak, does the injustice, they have to say, please forgive me, or nothing else they say counts. I'm sorry doesn't count. The person who has been offended
Is
waiting for them to say, please forgive me. They can forgive prior to the request. You can forgive if somebody punches you in the nose on the playground, you can forgive them immediately, but still tell the teacher you got punched in the nose. Well, I told a story this morning of a time that I reacted a little less than the Christian manner. It was the end of my 8th grade year in school. I was getting ready to go to high school, and I was in a school that was a junior high school that went up through 9th grade, and my town high school was only 10, 11, and 12. So we're leaving the school, and all the time I'd been in school, there was this guy that used to bully me. His name was Scotch Deutschman. I'll never forget that name. And he would bother me, and he would sneak punch me. He would do all kinds of things. He would, tell people around him jokes about me or say things that weren't true. He really made my life miserable. And I was pretty laid back about it. I was hurt, and inside I was torn to pieces, but I tried not to let him know. Well, the last day of school in my 8th grade year, I've got all my stuff from my locker in my arms, my book bags, my folders, my binders, and everything else. And he comes up behind me and hits me across the back with a baseball bat, right in the kidneys. Well, that was the end of my godly Christian attitude. I turned around, and what I hadn't told him for last year or two is I'd been taking self-defense courses. And when I turned around, I gave him a kick to the nuts so hard that he doubled over and leaned over. And when he leaned over, I took my hands, I clamped them together, I smashed him over the back of his neck, down to the ground. He went practically unconscious. He's moving around saying to his friends, I think we ought to go, guys. I think he's had enough. And I reveled in that for so long. And I think I still do just a little bit when I tell the story.
You have a right to, I think.
But 15 years later, I bumped into him. Scott Deutschman. And he looks at me and he says, excuse me? I said, Paul Van Sant from 8th grade. He says, I don't remember.
Yeah.
No question on him whatsoever. He got put down so bad it was ridiculous, but to him it wasn't important. He was just doing what he does. He hadn't done anything wrong, so it was nothing wrong to remember. I remembered it was wrong. I also remember my response probably wasn't the best and most Christian response I could have offered. But my memory held the thought because it meant something to me. Him hurting and teasing me didn't mean a darn thing to him. It was just a sport.
Well, got a question.
But
What about the saying, do unto others what you would have them do unto you. Wouldn't that? I mean, I know that's a stretch.
No, that's a good one. But there's one more important than that. Is that love God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength, and love your as yourself. You have to love yourself. Somebody asked me, they said, why would you hit him back? Because I cared about my well-being. I didn't want to die. And I was going to show him that he better stop now or he'd be the one that died. If you don't love yourself, you can't love anybody else. If you think you're so pitiful that you should be beat upon and teased and made fun of and marginalized, and there's just, you have no defense, it's just who you are, and they're just picking on you because of what you're like, then you cannot love another person. You have to love yourself first.
I was never a victim of that, so I can't-
But you also have to forgive yourself first.
Yeah.
If you can't forgive yourself for what you've done wrong, you can't forgive others for what they've done wrong, even if it was to you. It becomes a circular argument in a way. If you're not loving yourself, you can't love the other. And if you don't love the other, you don't love yourself because you're not doing what God wants you to. And but around and around and around. Love your neighbor as yourself. Now, does that mean you forget what you did wrong? No, I already said that. That's something that helps you set a marker so you don't do something stupid again. For instance, if somebody in the parish were to bump into me, I would not turn around and kick them in the you-know-whats and hit them over the head. No matter how much it reminded me of a hurt kidney 40, 50 years ago. Yes.
Well, here's something else too. Now, you tried to overlook everything that he did, but it got to the point where you couldn't take it anymore. I think we all have a certain breaking point. We're willing to overlook certain things, but people can upset you so badly that you would do things you normally would never do otherwise.
Well, there's truth to that, but I asked for it by not saying something about it sooner. I could have reported him to the principal. I could have told my parents. I could have told the crossing guard, listen,
He
this guy's
knew
hurting
he
me.
could get away with it. That's why he kept doing it.
Yeah. But the kicker is what didn't mean as much to him as it meant to me. And that's why I remembered it and he didn't. If you think what you're doing is sinful and bad, you'll remember it. I can tell you just about every time I made a major breach of the 10 Commandments. I can tell you every time I did something that was not fair or kind to another individual. Wake up in the middle of the night sometimes thinking about that stuff. Not because I wasn't forgiven, but because I remember. And if you remember, that's good because it moves you not to do it again. And it reminds you to just check in with God and say, look, I know you forgave me, but I'm really, really don't want to ever do this again. Yes. Oh, did you put your hand up? Oh,
No.
just scratching your shoulder. Okay, let's see if we can get one more question in. I thought it was it.
28%.
Yeah, we got 10 minutes. Now, this is going to tie it in with the theme of uncertainty. Where is there uncertainty in the act of granting forgiveness? And where is there uncertainty in asking for or receiving forgiveness? Where do you find uncertainty in those actions? Go ahead.
Well, let's say, like in your case, what you just talked about, I mean, you're willing to forgive that person, but you're not certain if that would change them.
Right.
You could only change yourself. You can't really change other people. Now, maybe he didn't. Maybe as a result of what you did, he stopped doing that to you, but this man, obviously, you spoke about was a perpetual bully.
Oh,
Maybe
yeah.
he still continued to bully other people because he wouldn't pick on you anymore, obviously. But maybe he still continued that trend towards bullying other people.
One of the reasons I was always afraid to do anything back, I thought I'd kill somebody because my trainer kept telling me, your hands are lethal weapons now. And I kept thinking, oh my God, I don't want to, what happens if I went to jail for defending myself, you know?
That almost happened to me.
Yeah, oh, it can happen.
Even if you don't want to hurt anyone, there are people that can just drive you to that point.
Oh,
Hurt
boy.
you and drive you. to
Well,
that
just
point.
like the guy last week, the guy, there was somebody going through the neighborhood, busting windows, ripping up things, turning on water faucets and flooding basements and doing all kinds of going to all down, not here, this is another state, but doing all kinds of things. He got to another house, did some of the things, then busted into the house and walked upstairs and walked right into this guy's bedroom. And the guy had a gun and killed him. Just like that. And the cop said, there's absolutely no reason for us to even think about charges. The man it was dark. He had no idea if he had a gun or a knife or what he had. He was in his bedroom in the dark and heard him break into the house, and he was prepared to defend himself, and he did. Period. End of statement. Now, I'm sure the guy who did the killing wasn't happy about it. And I know the guy who got killed wasn't happy about it. But the next door neighbor, you know what he said? Yeah, and he went through my house, he did this and this, and he keyed my car, and he flooded my basement, and justice has been done. I thought maybe that's a little understated, but what the crimes were, but nevertheless, you don't walk into a man's bedroom in his house in the dark and expect to live. Yeah, Bob.
Well, doesn't it also
Jim.
say in Matthew, he who lives by the sword shall perish by the sword? In other words, those who want to commit violent acts will eventually perish by a violent act themselves.
He who keys the car dies by the car.
Yeah.
Yeah, anyway. The uncertainty of any kind of act is you can forgive and they might not accept. You can ask for forgiveness and you might not get it. There's no certainty. The only thing certain in your life is that if you are forgiving someone else from your heart for the right reasons, or if you are hoping for forgiveness from God, because you can't depend on it from anybody else for whatever you've done, knowing that you're penitent and not going to do that act again if you can help it. And sometimes you do it again. And when you do, you have to say to yourself, boy, that was stupid, wasn't it? Please forgive me, Lord. You know?
Will you rather ask God than to ask the person? You know what I mean?
So, well, yes, you always ask God. You always ask God first. But I'm saying you do ask other people. If I said something that hurt my wife's feelings seriously in a moment of anger, you know, like, don't be so stupid, or maybe something like that. I want to ask for her forgiveness. I want her to know absolutely that I'm sorry for what happened. But I want to ask her for her forgiveness. Please forgive me. And then she has, again, as I said before, she then has control over the situation. Power is in her hand to let me know what needs to be done to be forgiven. And I also should ask God for forgiveness for everything.
Oh, yeah.
Even if people don't know I did it, I should still ask for forgiveness from God. Sometimes I tell people in counseling, it's better you don't tell the human being, just ask God. There's certain things that if you're too overly honest about, sometimes what happens is if you're really penitent and I'm really never going to do it, you don't ever shake that attitude from the person you offended.
What do you think? I'm just talking out of my head now. What if do you ever think if you asked God that you wouldn't be forgiven? I mean, I feel like you ask God for forgiveness, but God's going to forgive you. Is there a
The
time
only
ever that
the only innuendo there would be if you're not really serious, if you're using it as a tool for your own benefit and not being sincere. I've heard hitmen say, after I go to church, I pray to God to make sure I do it quickly and don't hurt him too bad. I shoot him, he's dead. I come back afterwards, say, I'm sorry I did that. I really shouldn't have. I know I shouldn't have done it, but please forgive me. And this goes over and over and over for every hit they do. It's their mental exercise for trying to feel not guilty and forgiven so they can go through life with some sense of integrity from their perspective. But if they didn't mean it, well, God's not going to forgive them. You know?
No, I meant, and again, I talk better when it's all about me, but this is just out there. And now I forgot what I wanted to say.
That's really out there.
It's,
Speculation.
yeah, I forgot, I really did. I mean, maybe it'll jump back in minutes.
Yeah.
Uh,
Well, oh, look, somebody brought crackers out for the soup. After I finish my second, I'll have to have another bowl of soup then.
There you go.
I have to leave.
All right, well, let's
I have another.
wrap this up.
That's what I meant. Well, I'm looking at this. Where is the uncertainty?
Did you guys do your homework from last week?
Yeah.
You can still do it. Spend time writing a paper in your own words, expressing your doubts and confidence in God.
A prayer.
No, well, you can write a prayer. You could write a little essay if you wanted. It's for you and for God, not for me. I'm not going to ask you to read it or show it to me. This week's homework assignment. Spend some time in prayer asking God to help you recalibrate your motivation for forgiveness. Why do you ask for forgiveness? Because you're supposed to? Because you have to? Because you don't want to go to hell? Because you want people to think you're a nice person?
Well, that's kind of what I was saying.
Or you do it because you really want to be forgiven by God and start, or the person you've offended, and start a new life with the people that you've offended. Begin by thanking God for all the ways you've been forgiven. Note any local or global stories you know that describe the power of forgiveness, and think about how they fit with God's work of restoration of a broken world. Then think about the steps you need to take today and over upcoming days to forgive and be forgiven by someone else. The Lord be with you. Let us pray. Gracious God, thank you for forgiving me of my sins. Empower me to follow the example you set for us in Jesus, that I might both forgive others and seek forgiveness. Help me to participate in your work to reconcile the world. Amen.
Amen.
All right, well, I know some people were touched by it. Right? I say right.
Yes.
And I appreciated your sharing the way you did.
When that happened, I had just gone back to church after being away from church for 25 years. And we were reaffirming baptismal vows.
Mhm.
And there was a gang of us and we're in a circle. And I uncontrollably started to weep
Mm.
for a good 10 minutes. And I felt forgiven.
I'll bet. And when you feel that, you can't deny it.
No, you can't. You can't.
It's almost like a flood. Remember I was talking before about glowing? Did you hear that sermon about glowing?
No, I don't think so.
Well, there was one particular time in my ministry when I was so deep in meditation and close to God that after the service was over, this woman ran up to me, pointed at me and said, "You were glowing."
Oh,
I said,
wow.
"Excuse me?" I said, "No." I said, well, "Thank you for the compliment." She says, "No, you don't understand. You were glowing." And she got really up in my face, telling me how unbelievably phenomenal this was, and I should write a book and all kinds of. And the truth, I felt very, very close to God at that time. I was at service where I didn't have all the responsibilities. So when I got done doing my part, I sat down, put my palms up, and prayed. And I was
Wow.
really, really close to God at the time. And people say, "Well, how does that happen? What do you mean that happens?" I said, "Well, what about a bride? Doesn't a bride
Yeah.
literally glow coming down? I said, it isn't just a smile. It isn't just the light bouncing off their pearly white teeth that have been done by the dentist the day before. They're glowing. God gives us, there are people who will identify people's auras, and they'll be able to tell what mood you're in because they have the capability, the gift,
Yeah, yeah.
prophetic gift of seeing your aura. And they'll still say, you're very depressed right now. And you'll say, oh, you're crazy. I'm not depressed. He says, no, there's something on your mind that's really weighing you down. And then if they beat on you long enough, you admit whatever it is and stop putting the false front up, and things like that. But our spirits are as much an integral part of who we are and a functional part of who we are as any other part of us. And
Yeah.
really kind of cool. But yes, you felt your forgiveness, and I'll bet you,
I felt it, and it was dramatic, and
and it was real.
yeah, it was about 15 years ago, I guess.
Really?
It was probably within a few months of when I started going back to church, and I had met a pastor, and they invited me to their church, and I've been at church ever since.
Well,
And
tell that pastor I said thank you.
yeah, if I could find her, I would. She was one of the first female Episcopal priests.
Really?
Yeah.
Wild.
Yeah.
Well, I thank you all for being here tonight. And who's on YouTube? We had more people come on YouTube while we were doing our thing.
Father Paul, it's
Oh.
Carol. Father Paul. it's
Yes, Carol. Yes,
I
Carol.
need the book. I got the wrong book. I got Embracing the Uncertain 40 Devotions,
Oops.
book you were using.
Well, there's a book here. If you think you can make it to church Sunday?
I'll be in Thursday for OSL. the
Oh,
meeting.
good. See me then, and I'll make sure you get a copy. We've got some extra copies.
Okay, great.
All
Thank
righty.
you so much.
You're welcome. God bless you. And Karen Tessa, thank you for being with us. And Mary Ann Payne signed in about around about 45 minutes ago, I guess. I just missed her. Didn't notice it until just now. And Karen Tessa says, well received. I enjoyed. Thank you for the meaningful Bible study. Have a peaceful evening and a restful night. I couldn't have said it better myself.
Wow, that is nice.
Okay.
Thank you, everyone. And we'll
All
see
right,
you
good night. I'm gonna go make my dinner.
tonight.
All right.